Greetings and welcome to another edition of Indie Dev Life, the show where we try to give you an insight into the lives and experiences of indie game developers. And in today's show, we have Catalin Marcu from the studio GrimTalin, creator of the Adventures of Elena Temple. Without further ado, let's begin.
Hello indie creators and supporters. My name is Catalin Marcu. I have created the retro platformer The Adventures of Elena Temple. Prior to becoming an indie developer, I have been working for about 10 years in the mobile games industry. How did it all begin? The first time I knew that I wanted to make games was when I was about 12 years old. I was playing a game called Sociable, and I remember designing levels for it. I was designing them on paper. I didn't have any way of actually putting them in the game. I was just playing them in my head, and ever since then, every decision that I made, what high school to follow, what college to go to, they were all in support of this dream I had to actually be able to create my own games one day. Why did you want to become a developer? Creating games is the best way for me to output both my technical and my creative skills. I started out as a programmer, but I always had this creative side of me that I wanted to tap into. And this is why during my career I added game design responsibilities. My dream was to become capable of taking an idea and implementing it all the way through into a final playable commercial product. Did your friends and family encourage you as a game developer? Programmers are very well viewed here in Romania, so yeah, definitely my parents were excited about me working in the IT industry. I'm not sure how hyped they were about me creating games. I'm not sure they understood what this industry was all about, but they did support me into fulfilling this dream of mine. As for friends, you'd imagine when we were kids, everybody was excited about making games, and having a friend of theirs who'd make games when he grew up, yeah, they definitely pitched a lot of ideas to me of what I should make. What was your first interaction with video games? What was it like? My first interaction with video games was when my brother brought home a console. He borrowed it from a friend. It was a Spectrum clone called Synthes, and you'd have to load the games onto the console using these compact cassettes on a cassette player. It would take tens of minutes to load, and it was such a treat. I remember when the splash image finally loaded. I was watching the loading process mesmerized, because besides the image there were these loading lines, horizontal loading lines, colored, moving around on the sides of the splash image. It was great because when the game finally managed to load, it didn't even matter to me what it was all about. It was just that I finally had the chance to explore it and to learn about it. Who's your favorite character in video games? I'm not sure if I have a favorite character. I love Nathan Drake and Elena from the Uncharted series, Kate Walker from Siberia, George Stobart from the Broken Sword series, definitely Ellie and Joel from The Last of Us. I mean, if I really had to pick one, yeah, I guess it would have to be Nathan Drake, because he says crap a lot. What was your childhood game? Without doubt, Heroes of Might and Magic 3. I still get goosebumps when I remember the awesome gameplay, the beautiful art, great music, and I think it was one of the best uses of sound effects in a game that I played. In my opinion, that game is a true masterpiece. What's the most memorable thing you've met in a game? I'm not sure if it's the most memorable moment, but for me, the scene in Hellblade where Senua is talking to herself in the mirror. I don't want to spoil it too much, but that was really special. And then There's that scene in Uncharted 4 after Nate and Elena have a fight, and you have to drive the car around and all the sound effects go away, and you're left only with this beautiful music that really makes the moment sink in. That was amazing. And Valkyria Chronicles, for example, also had lots of memorable moments for me. There's this scene where Alicia and Welkin are on this big cannon thingy, and there's fire all around them, and that was a special moment. What are your favorite games and genres? I don't really have a favorite genre. I try anything that piques my interest, and if I think a game is good and it would be enjoyable for me, I definitely play it. I love narrative-driven games, I love adventures, action games, the occasional shooter, RPG, pretty much everything. I don't like games that make me do the same thing over and over. So this also translates into what I like to make. I mean, I don't have a favorite genre. I made a platformer as my first indie game, and while I do love some platformers like Rayman Legends and Ori and the Blind Forest, I couldn't say it's my favorite genre. I doubt that my next game will be a platformer too. It will be something that I find interesting at the time I start working on it. What types of games do you create? Up until the Adventures of Elena Temple, I made mobile games, and I've made all kinds of games, all kinds of genres and styles. Now that I'm an indie, I've just made one, this retro platformer, and what I do know for sure is that I don't like to create games that outlive their welcome. I'd rather create short experiences that leave a sweet taste after you finish them, rather than these huge mammoths of content that become so bland that by the time you finish them, you're not left with a very good impression. What are you specialized in? How did you get to do that? As a solo indie developer, I have to take care of all aspects of my game. I have the most experience in programming because I started out as a programmer, and in game design I've been doing that for lots of years. But for the Adventures of Elena Temple, I also did the graphics, the sounds, and pretty much everything else. The only thing I didn't do myself was the music. What tools do you use to build your game? I've worked with lots of technologies and several engines during my career, but now I have settled on Windows and Unity. For graphics, I use Photoshop Elements and Procreate. For video editing, Premiere Elements, and for sound, Audacity definitely, and whatever tool fits best the current project I'm working on. Considering the fact that there are plentiful of engines available for indie developers, would you use one of those or make one? I use Unity, and I wouldn't create my own technology. I have a very limited number of years on this planet, and I don't want to spend a few of those working on my own technology that would barely scratch the levels of quality and complexity that you can find on tools available right now on the market. For me at least, it would be a waste of time, and again I want to underline that for me, because what's important to me is expressing myself through games and not through tools and technology. Whatever gets me faster to the final game, that's what I use. What are the specs of your PC Mac? I use an Alienware laptop. It has an i7 CPU, 16 gigas of RAM, DDR4. The video chipset is 980M by NVIDIA. It's powerful enough for me. I've been using it for more than 2 years, and I intend on using it for more as long as its performance serves its purpose. How much time do you work a day on average? 6 hours of concentrated work, but if I really want to get something done, that can go up to 12 hours easily. Where do you draw inspiration from? Pretty much everything around me. I read a lot, I watch movies, I play definitely. I observe, I like to go in nature and relax and meditate. So yeah, I have a very loose creative process, but I'm very happy with it. When you begin a new project, what's the first thing that you work on? The story, gameplay, or the graphics? It's a combination of core gameplay and visual style. It's very important to me that I find out if the game is fun as early as possible, so I build a prototype for that. But at the same time, I want to find a visual style that looks good and it's appealing, but that it's something that I can create with my own resources. What distribution platforms you prefer to use? Right now it's Steam for me, but that might change in the future. What is your favorite platform to develop for? Making a game for Windows was pretty darn awesome and very liberating for me, especially since I've made mobile games for more than 10 years, and I definitely intend on keeping at that, on making games for Windows, even if I port them later on other platforms. Regarding game development in your country, are there a lot of companies trying to make a living by creating video games? Romania has a pretty good industry. It has grown a lot lately, but still it's not the biggest one around. I mean, sure, we have lots of studios, from indie ones, small indie ones, to major players in the industry, but I feel we still have a little more to go before we truly become attractive for relocation purposes. How hard was it to get on Steam? Not hard at all, definitely a lot easier than I expected. I had much more trouble creating my company than I had with onboarding Steam. What do you think about Steam Workshop? I think Steam Workshop is a very valuable tool for attracting and keeping players inside your game, and for giving them this deepened sense of ownership, because you tend to love a game more if you have something you've created inside of it. I didn't use Steam Workshop in my game, in the Adventures of Elena Temple, but that was just because I didn't feel I had enough time to make a proper use of it. It's definitely something I'll consider for my future games. User-generated content can add a lot of value to a game, and it can transform that game in a way that even its creator didn't think of. Yes, I can say that modders are a kind of indie developers, and it's very common that modders make the jump to creating their own full games later on. How do you approximate the budget you need for a game before developing it? We programmers and designers are pretty well known for how terrible our estimates are. For me, I estimate using a combination of list of features, worksheets, and past experiences. But it's very important for me that I am aware and prepared to cut things whenever I need them, because almost certainly things will escalate at some point, and you have to be ready to let go of things. I'm not stuck on creating the perfect game. As an indie developer, would you like to sell your games retail, and what do you think about digital and retail releases? I think all game developers love that feeling of holding your game in a physical box, holding it in your hands. I know I'd definitely love that, but honestly, for me, it's more important to be able to digitally distribute my game. Maybe I'd create a few physical boxes to keep as mementos and to give to some of my friends. But when it comes to selling my games, it's very important to me to go digitally, because I think it's the smarter and more practical way. And if a physical box doesn't have some extra content like an art book or a statue, I think it kind of becomes waste of material. But maybe that's just my opinion, because I don't like to sell my games once I'm done playing them. I'm sure people who do sell their games don't agree with me. What venues of monetization do you consider for your projects? I'm not excluding anything in the future, but I'm a big fan of premium games, of you paying just once, getting the game and playing it for how much you like and whatever way you like. Maybe I'll do DLCs and so at some point, but with the same line of thinking, you pay for extra premium content. What's your approach to DLCs? More levels, more story, more missions. That's my ideal DLC. What's your take on VR? I was hyped about the VR until I tried it for a couple of months and I just couldn't get past motion sickness. I think it's a great technology, but I don't see it becoming mainstream. I don't see it fundamentally changing the way we play. Sure, there will be some people who will prefer it, but I think most players will still like to sit on the couch in front of the TV. I don't have any plans of creating a VR game anytime soon. If some big publisher contacts you to propose a deal, would you consider it? I'm always open to discussions, but it's not something I'm actively pursuing though. Regarding AAA games and indie games, what's your opinion on these two kinds of games? I think they are equally important and with plenty of space in the market for both of them and for all games in between. For me, it's not about the size of the team or the budget, it's about the quality of the game and how much I enjoy it. I mean, sure, yeah, if a game is really good and it's been created by a handful of people, I respect that a lot. But I also respect the hundreds of people that work together to create, for example, the next Assassin's Creed game. I've worked with teams and I know how difficult it is to get lots of people on the same page. And for someone to steer hundreds of people is very, very impressive to me. How well do you believe your game needs to sell in order to let you continue your work full time? I don't need to sell that much, but I'd rather keep the numbers for myself. Being a solo indie developer has its advantages when it comes to how much money you need to keep going. What do you think about gaming conferences? I go to Reboot Develop every year in Croatia. I go to other conferences too, but I found that sometimes it's a lot of money spent with very little return. I prefer going to Reboot Develop because it's very affordable and at the same time with a very high quality, both in terms of talks and the kind of people you can meet there. Conferences do have their purpose. For example, dev-focused ones are very good for inspiration and for a sense of belonging, while public events are very good for showcasing your game and getting real-life feedback. If it's within your budget, definitely go to conferences, but if you're tight, be very picky about which ones. In your opinion, what is the best way to promote your game? Well, isn't that the $1 million question? I'm a big fan of demos. I think it's very important to show the player what your game is about, to give him a chance to try it, and if he enjoys it and the price is fair, I think he will buy your game. Most ways to promote your game can be useful, but also ineffective at times. For example, you definitely want to be on social media, but I wouldn't spend too much money on social ads. I wouldn't do a bundle too early after I've released my game because it devalues it, and the same goes with giveaways. If you do a giveaway, it might negatively affect the perceived value of your game. YouTubers and streamers in general are very good, but they have so much to choose from, so many games to choose from these days that it's hard to get coverage from them. The same goes for press. It's hard to get an article written about your game, not impossible. So I think the idea is to try a bit of everything and to find the recipe that works for you and your games. When do you think it's necessary to advertise the game? As soon as you have something relevant to show, start promoting your game, because I mean, even if you feel like nobody is listening, you should keep at it because you never know when an opportunity appears. How are you affected by reviews? Reviews are very important. They can make or break your game. The best way, in my opinion, to get good reviews, is, at least from players, is to make a good game and to be fair to your users. Give them a demo so that they can make an informed purchase. Don't overpromise, don't oversell your game, don't overprice it, but also don't be too quick to underprice it, because early purchasers will be upset about it. Just be honest, be fair, and make a good game. Has Steam Early Access helped you polish your game more than you could have normally? I didn't use Steam Early Access, instead I went with itch.io, but I think any form of early access is very valuable to get players' feedback, and it really helps to make a better game. I mean, if you're not stubborn, if you really listen, I did some really good changes for the Adventures of Elena Temple based on people's advice, and I'm very happy with that. I'm not sure I'd use Steam Early Access in particular because I prefer having that clean release on Steam, the release of my final game. What do you think about crowdfunding? I think it's a lot harder these days for a game to get crowdfunded. It's still a very viable path, sure, but I think it's a very hard one, and if you do go that way, you need to do your homework really well and have something really appealing to show, because game ideas don't get crowdfunded anymore. What was your first game released? How has it been received? My first game was some mobile game from back in the day. It was an educational game with farm animals. It was a client project. But my first indie game is The Adventures of Elena Temple, and I have no idea how it will perform financially. So I don't know if it was the right choice to make. But when it comes to my freedom and creativity, it was definitely the perfect choice for me. How many games have you worked on in the past? Too many to count, from really obscure ones to a major mobile hit called Frozen Freefall. What were the obstacles you faced during development and how did you overcome them? The biggest problem with being a solo indie developer is the solo part. Not having anyone to consult with and to bounce ideas off of was really hard. Thankfully, I had two friends whom I could talk to, and they were of great help. Also, being a solo developer means you have to wear all the shoes, even the ones that you're not comfortable wearing. But you do push forward and you make things happen because it's the only way. What lessons have you learned from development? One of the hardest lessons I learned, and it took me a few years to learn it, was to let go. Don't get stuck on an idea, don't get stuck on having a feature. Be prepared to pivot, be prepared to accept new solutions, accept the inevitable changes that appear on the course of a project, and you'll be better for it. Your game will be better and your timelines will be better. What are you working on right now? I'm working on The Adventures of Elena Temple, an old school monochrome platformer that you can play on 7 virtual machines inspired by classics such as Macintosh, Game Boy, Commodore 64 and others. It's available for PC and Mac on Steam and itch.io, and it's set to release on March 15th. How is the Kiwi selling market? For now it doesn't affect me, but I am vigilant about it, and I'm very careful to whom I give out free keys to, and I don't do giveaways. What do you think about piracy? I don't mind piracy at all. I played my fair share of pirated games when I was a kid, and it was the only way to access them back then, and it made me into an avid supporter of game developers when I grew up. So if someone wants to pirate my game, then that's fine, it's his choice. I do have a demo for him to try before making a purchase, but if the demo doesn't convince him, again, it's his choice. Maybe sometimes in the future that person will support me when he can afford to, or maybe when the game is discounted or something. So even if piracy might hurt me now, in the future it might work for my benefit. Have you thought about what your next game will be? That's a tough question. I have some ideas and I'm leaning towards one in particular, but I'm far from making a decision. Because even after the Steam release for the Adventures of Elena Temple, I still have work to do on it. For example, I want to port it to another platform. Did your games win any award? I don't think so. Frozen Freefall got about 200 million users, but I don't think anyone gave an award for that. What is your greatest achievement so far? My greatest achievement was having a game I worked on, Frozen Freefall, be featured on Penny Arcade, this webcomic I've been reading for years and years. What's the game you've always wanted to make? I had a lot of answers to this question in the past years, but not anymore. I don't believe in a dream game anymore. I'd rather be creating lots of unique and interesting experiences rather than a big mammoth game. In your opinion, how is the gaming industry doing at this moment? I think the gaming industry is doing just fine, and it will keep doing better and better, even if it will have to change and adapt along the way. There's something for everyone right now, and one of the problems that I see is that some people want everything to be the way they like. But what they have to understand is that everything in this industry exists because there are people who enjoy those types of content. And when they stop enjoying those types of content, the gaming industry will also move on. What plans do you have for the future? Release the Adventures of Elena Temple, take a few days off, start working on the port and release that, start working on a new game, and repeat all of the above. I plan on being an indie developer for as long as I can support my family doing it. If you could go back in time and give yourself some advice, what would that be? Relax, work as hard, but don't stress yourself as much. Things are rarely the life or death scenarios that other people want to make them seem to be. What games did you enjoy and don't miss out? Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice, Uncharted, The Lost Legacy, Life is Strange, Before the Storm, Assassin's Creed Origins, Horizon Zero Dawn, Static for VR, and What Remains of Edith Finch. Leave a message for other indie devs in addition to your final message. Keep making good, unique games, and don't give in to despair when things don't seem to go your way. Final message. Thank you for listening to me. Please consider playing the demo version of the Adventures of Elena Temple and purchasing it if you like.
Thank you for watching this show. If you enjoyed it, please consider watching some of our other videos and maybe sharing them or giving a thumbs up if you feel like it. And if you really liked what you saw, please check out our Patreon page. For just $1 a month, you could help us make much better shows and get some rewards in the process.